Hi, REBT 3 Minute Therapy viewers. This is another episode in our 3 Minute Therapy podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein. I'm an REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy practitioner, and I'm here with another expert REBT practitioner, Kevin Benbow. And today, we'll be discussing one type of eating disorder, but before we do, I always try to open by explaining REBT. REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, was devised by Albert Ellis, a brilliant psychologist in the 1950s. He has over 80 books about the subject. I have 4. The main one is 3-Minute Therapy. And REBT was the first cognitive behavior therapy, a more familiar term to most people. The idea of REBT is that, number one, our emotions come from our thinking and our behaviors come from our thinking, not from situations, events, or occurrences, but from what we tell ourselves about those situations. And what we tell ourselves may lead to reasonable conclusions or unreasonable conclusions. And today, Kevin and I will be discussing an unreasonable conclusion from your preferences, and that is compulsive eating or eating addiction. And any addiction you have comes from your thinking, and that's thinking in terms of demands, absolutes, musts, shoulds, supposed tos, have tos, demands we put on ourselves, others, or situations. Usually with addictions, it's demands we put on situations. And that normally takes the form of, because I prefer to eat and satisfy my hunger or satisfy my urge, therefore I absolutely must. I have to eat right now, and if I don't, I'll be miserable forever. So that's normally the must, or one of them, that leads to eating disorders. If you start with a preference, then you can look at your greater preferences. For example, I prefer to eat right now, but I have a greater preference not to gain any more weight, so I'll put off my eating until my next meal. But if you conclude, I prefer to eat right now, and I must, and then I have to, the must and the have to overrides any greater preferences, because a must is a preference to the nth degree. Now, one of the common problems with addictions, as with compulsive eating, is that once you act addictively, you often create a secondary disturbance for yourself, and that is blaming yourself for doing the overeating, or hating yourself, condemning yourself for having that problem. So first you have a must, I must eat, then you have a secondary must, meaning it comes second. I shouldn't have overeaten. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. I'm a fatty. And that often leads to depression. And then some people overeat in response to that. I'm depressed about my compulsive eating. I have to escape from my depression. Another demand, I have to escape from my depression. And so I'll eat to escape. So this could be almost a never-ending cycle, and we see that with some obese people. Kevin, did you have that's the diagnosis, and then we'll go on to what you can do about it. But Kevin, did you have anything to add about the diagnosis?
Well, actually, yeah, I have a couple of questions, if I could. Generally speaking, we work with secondary distress first, the self-blame, the I must not have, and problem with an eating disorder. I must not overeat. Is that generally the tack you take, Michael, when you work with people that have compulsive eating problems? Do you start with the secondary and then move on to the primary?
Actually, that's a very good question. And yes, I normally, actually, that's thinking about it. I ask the client, I point out the secondary, I must not overeat, and the primary, I must overeat. And I often ask them which they'd like to start with. But if they defer to me, then I think it's best to start with the secondary, because the secondary tends to magnify and encapsulate your initial problem, your initial must. So that I think works best. And yeah, go on, Kevin.
Yeah, so that makes sense. It would be the client preference. Of course, there are times when not working on the secondary, we might not get much traction, but it certainly makes sense to start with the client's preference. And I have a question about addictions. Generally always being related to situations. Or you said something like that at the beginning. Could you say some more about that?
Yeah, addictions are start with a situation such as, and we're talking about food addiction, but it goes for all addictions, such as someone offering you some chocolate cake. That's the situation. And then if it goes against your diet and you tell yourself, I must taste the chocolate cake, it looks so good, I have to indulge, or I must not disappoint my host who's offering me the chocolate cake. So I'll override my preferences and do what I must. So not only do I recommend starting with the secondary disturbance with compulsive eating, but I recommend starting with the secondary disturbance with any disturbed emotion. So if you're feeling depressed and you're depressed about being depressed, or angry about being depressed, or depressed about being angry, anxious about being anxious, those kinds of things. Humans are abstract thinkers and a little crazy. So it's easy for us to create secondary disturbances about our primary disturbances. Kevin, were you going to speak further about a question or something else?
No, I think I'm good so far. I'd like to mention my own personal preference. I tend to refrain from using the term addiction. Uh, I don't particularly like it. It's just a personal preference. I tend to refer to these problems, what some people call the behavioral addictions, as more compulsive, unhealthy behaviors, that sort of thing. And I tend to reserve the concept of addiction for chemical dependency, alcoholism, but in the end, the how we work with it in REBT is pretty much the same. We're looking for the irrational beliefs and changing behaviors. So that was just something I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification, Kevin. I think that's important. The way I feel about the term addiction is that an addictive behavior is any behavior you engage in that on any kind of regular basis that interferes with, blocks, or sabotages your long-term goal. So, and the way I use it, which is different from the way you use it, Kevin, and probably you're more in the majority than I am. But an addiction, the way I see it, is any behavior that interferes with, blocks, or sabotages your long-term goal. And I use it to apply to anything, not only the traditional substance abuse addictions, but also compulsive eating, compulsive gambling, compulsive sex risk taking. Another one that I get sometimes is compulsive masturbating, and anything that a human finds pleasurable, they easily turn into addiction. Another way to put it is they do it too much.
Mm-hmm.
They eat too much, they drink too much, and too much, I think, more technically means goes against your long-term goals.
That's a good barometer, is whether or not it impedes their daily functioning, whether or not it stands in the way of them getting what they want out of life. I get this question all the time. Do you think I have a drinking problem? Do you think I have a and that's generally my question, is how is this affecting your daily life? How is it getting in the way? Is it getting in the way of working or relationships, in the case of pornography, for example?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. When clients ask that. I also wanted to mention Smart Recovery. I'm a facilitator with Smart Recovery. SMART stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training, and they're self-help groups for people recovering from addictions or recovered from addictions or wanting to recover from addictions. And there's no charge. Anyone can attend. And if you'd like to see when a Smart Recovery meeting is, and there are many because they're all on Zoom now, so it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in your area, go to smartrecovery.org and they list all the meetings. And we have very good facilitators for all the meetings. We have at least one just about every day of the week. I facilitate the last Monday meeting of the month. So I just did yesterday, and also the second Tuesday of the month, which tends to be a larger meeting, 80 to 100 people there. You're welcome to attend. Another thing I wanted to say about addiction is that there are not only cognitive solutions, which are mainly questioning, challenging, contradicting your musts. There's no reason I absolutely must eat when I'm hungry or when I feel like it or when I have the urge or when everyone else is eating. But also there are behavioral problems or behavioral solutions you can use, such as goals and rewards and penalties. So you could give yourself a goal, say, no chocolate cake this week. And if I succeed, I give myself a reward. Watch a video that you've been wanting to watch as a reward if you go for a week without chocolate cake. Or you could have a penalty if you do have chocolate cake and that goes against your goal, then you could have a penalty. And an easy one to come up with is a financial penalty. There are also non-monetary penalties, but a financial penalty would be something like you rip up a $10 bill before you go to bed if you had chocolate cake that day, or you send it to your least favorite charity, the hated politician on your radar, or you could give it to an organization you don't like the Ku Klux Klan, assuming you don't like the Ku Klux Klan. Get their address and send it to them. So there are various penalties. So that's a behavioral approach.
I have a question about penalties, Michael.
Yeah.
I've attempted to use penalties many times, and I don't seem to get as much client buy-in with penalties as I'd like. Any thoughts on that?
I assume you tell them about both rewards and penalties,
right?
And they usually go for rewards, not penalties.
Generally speaking, I can only think of a handful of people that have actually carried out some of the penalties that I've suggested. But most people, they're all for rewards. But when I suggest sending a donation to the political party they hate, or to burning money, or whatever that is, I get this. Oh, I don't think I want to do that. So,
yeah. So you could try non-monetary penalties. Such, and some of my creative clients has used taking an ice cold shower for 3 minutes, or not brushing your teeth for the next 2 days, or going to bed in your street clothes and you wear the same clothes, you get up in the morning. So there are all kinds of creative penalties people can come up with that are non-monetary if it's the money part that they object to.
Okay, thank you. Those are some good suggestions I'm going to try out. I like that ice cold shower one. That's
I don't know if your clients will though.
right. That's the idea, that they
That's
don't
right.
like it.
That's right. Yeah, good point.
Right,
So it's sort of ambivalence. They don't like it, but they like it enough as a
Mhm.
penalty and a motivator to do it.
Right. Now, you're
Yeah.
talking about behavioral strategies. Earlier, you talked about situations like someone offers you a piece of chocolate cake. Uh, do you use rehearse? Do you rehearse any refusal skills or behaviors like that? How to politely refuse and that sort of thing.
I don't rehearse, which would be a good idea probably with clients. Uh, I consider suggesting to the client we rehearse it, role play a
Hmm.
situation, but I often give them a suggestion of how to uh, how to do it, such as thank you very much for the offer, but I'll pass this time.
Hmm.
Um, so that's one way to do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Another thing they can do, in terms of sticking to a diet, since we're talking about compulsive eating, is if they're invited to a dinner party, for example, and I just had a client in the last few days who said, well, I was invited to a dinner party and they had uh, chocolate cake or something similar, and it's off my diet, but they were nice enough to serve it, so I ate it. So what I suggest you do is practice some assertiveness and call the party, who's ever throwing the party, in advance and tell them, look, I'm on a diet. I'm haven't allowed myself to eat X, Y, or Z, chocolate cake or high fat foods or whatever it is. So, so I just want to let you know in advance so you don't go out of your way to make it for me. Now, I'm on a particular very strict diet for health called a whole food vegan diet. And what I do is I call the host in advance and tell them I'm on a whole food vegan diet. And since people often don't understand it, I say, well, why don't I just bring my own food? And I've done that, and that's worked quite well. So I find people pretty understanding.
That thanks for mentioning that. I'm on a low carb diet, not keto. I'm staving off diabetes by doing that, and I find that I can limit what I do. Uh, it really the penalty for me is the prospect of getting diabetes, which I really don't want, and so I tell people not to go out of their way for me, but I'll bring my own stuff. I'll do my own thing if need be. But yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
good. And by a low carb diet, Kevin, I think you mean processed carbs. You're not
Hmm.
against eating vegetables.
Oh
Veg-
no. Hmm.
Vegetables are high in carbs, but they're complex carbs, not
Right.
processed carbs. So you
Right.
mean processed food like cake and cookies and ice cream and those kinds
Yes.
of things,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Right. I eat a lot of protein, things like that. I actually eat a lot of things that were prepared for the keto diet, but I'm not strict keto, keeping my carb intake 50 and under. That's not my goal. My goal is just to keep my A1C down so that I don't end up these like so many of my family members did.
Right. And that's very good, very good. And again, when you say keeping your carb down, you mean
Hmm.
processed carbs,
Right, right, right.
not vegetables, beans, those.
No, 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 not at all. Well, there are some vegetables that are high. Well, now you caught me. Now I'm going to have to research what I'm doing a little bit more in depth. I
Okay,
tend to just look at my label, and it's worked so far. I've been able
good,
to
good,
keep my
good.
glucose low. It used to spike and put me out of commission. Now it's pretty stable. So now it's gonna be important for me to look at that. So. Mhm.
Okay, good, very good. Okay, I think that's all I was going to say. So look for secondary disturbance. Are you blaming yourself for your compulsive eating or addictive eating? So
Mhm.
work on that first. Work on unconditional self acceptance,
Mhm.
accepting yourself unconditionally as the imperfect human you are, whether you eat the chocolate cake or not. If you do eat the chocolate cake, all that proves is you're imperfect, not a bad person, not a loser, not a failure, not someone who can't improve in the future. That reminds me of another common belief that people who engage in compulsive eating have, and that is, I can't change. I tried to change in X, Y, and Z ways, and I failed, so I can't. Well, I can't is, in a sense, an irrational belief, because I can't really means, if the rational part, if we were to unpack it, can't really means I haven't succeeded in the past and I won't in the future. But all we know is the past. We know that you haven't succeeded in the past. That doesn't prove you'll fail in the future. So past failure doesn't equal future failure, because you can change your thinking and change your behavior. So don't fall back on, I can't change because I've been this way for so long. You can, if you work at it, and especially if you change your thinking and give up the I can't. I can't becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can't change, so I'll eat the chocolate cake, and eating the chocolate cake proves I can't change. So it's circular reasoning as well. You can, if you work at it, if you change your thinking.
That
Yeah,
word,
Kevin?
that word try. I'll try to do it. I'm sure you've heard this a lot of times. It occurred to me recently. I always internally felt like I was hearing a cop out whenever I would hear someone say, "Well, I'll try to do it." And my current approach is to encourage clients to say something more along the lines of "I'll work at doing it," as opposed to "I'll try doing it." And maybe you can give me some more insight. There's something about that word "try" that almost seems to set a lot of people up for failure, like it's going to be a one-time trial, and then if
Right.
that doesn't work, oh well, I'm doomed to failure.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Try leave some wiggle room in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I see what you mean. But there is a saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again,
Yes.
which I like. So you'll try, fine. But if you fail, don't give up. Try again and try differently, try more wisely. So that kind of trying is okay. Keep in mind your determination to succeed. So you're less likely to say, well, I tried and that's it. Also, as we discussed earlier, you can set penalties for your trying. If you are going to try to avoid the chocolate cake, set a penalty. If you don't, if you eat the chocolate cake, tear up the $10 bill if that's the penalty. And if you don't, give yourself a reward, watch a video you've been wanting to watch, or take a 10-minute break from your day of hard work, those kinds of things. Go for a walk, whatever would be more of a reward for you. But your point is well taken. If you're using the phrase "I'll try," be careful. Be careful that you're not using it as an excuse.
Yeah. Just thought of another penalty: watching a movie you hate.
Yes, right. Watching a movie you hate, sending an email to someone you dislike and tell them, I apologize for everything I've said. Let's be friends. So there's no end in creativeness for penalties.
Oh, how about, I remember Albert Ellis writing, spend a half hour talking to a person you find boring.
Yeah, right. Oh, that reminds me. I had a client who cured his procrastination. It wasn't addictive eating, but it's in the same ballpark. He cured his procrastination by giving him the penalty of, whenever he procrastinates, have a teaspoon of vinegar. Now, some people might like vinegar, and vinegar, I think, is healthy. But if you don't like vinegar, have a teaspoon of vinegar. Albert Ellis had another creative penalty, and that is, the penalty is, don't eat a teaspoon of shit, but imagine and picture yourself eating a teaspoon of shit. And that helped one of his clients. So there are innumerable penalties you can come up with. But the issue is using it. If you set a penalty and you don't use it, then that sets the stage for destroying that very effective strategy in the future. So it's very important with a penalty, you implement it and implement it as soon as possible.
So it seems that there's a fine line with these penalties, isn't there? We don't want it to be so much that a person's just going to recoil in horror and not do it, but we don't want it to be so light that it's nothing, it means nothing.
A very good point. And I
Yeah.
make that point about financial penalties. Don't
Yeah.
penalize yourself $100 if you're not
Yeah.
going to do it, but
Mhm.
don't penalize yourself 3 cents if it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that much, just as you're saying. So
Right.
I think that that's a very good
Mhm.
caveat about these
Yeah.
penalties.
Don't send in your 401k as a one-time penalty, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Did you have anything else to conclude with, Kevin?
No, I'm good. I wanted to mention something in passing about SMART, I guess, though. I really like the approach of SMART, and tentatively, I encounter people who are members of some of the 12-step groups from time to time. And at first, I would tentatively suggest SMART as an alternative because, of course, I must not offend my clients and they must not be upset with something I say. And more, I'm finding clients that really the 12-step programs aren't resonating with them. And so when I describe SMART to them, I'm finding a lot of people are really encouraged and eager to check out something. SMART has a wonderful website, and I refer them there all the time. So just wanted to put that plug in for SMART.
Yes. Okay. Very good. And speaking of the 12 steps, we could do an entire episode on the 12 steps, which would probably be useful in the future.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to mention that REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, and the 12 steps are not necessarily mutually exclusive. They have things in common and things that are not in common. And I've had clients who are in the 12 steps and like it and like
Mhm.
REBT. And one of the things in common is the idea of acceptance. The
Mm.
12 steps relies on the serenity prayer, which is something like accept what I can change and change what I can. And that's on board with REBT. We go for
Mhm.
acceptance.
Mhm.
So there are good things about the 12 steps and other things which we can discuss in a future
Mhm.
episode, which aren't so good.
Mhm. Agreed.
Okay, very good, very good. I think this was very comprehensive on compulsive eating and actually on all addictions. So I hope you enjoyed it and got some good information from it. And if you did, please give us a thumbs up and please comment below questions and additions. If you'd like to be a guest on our show or you have a subject for us, let us know. And contribute to Patreon to help support us. And I think that was it. Thanks again to Chris Rossini for helping us at the technical end. Thank you, Kevin, for your great participation. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, an REBT therapist, and you can find me on Google. And Kevin, can you be found on Google?
Yes, if you Google my name, Kevin Benbow, you'll find me. My website is www.cogyuma.com. If you live in Arizona, I probably take your insurance unless you have Medicaid or Medicare. And I'm also licensed in New Mexico.
Okay, very good. And my website is 3minutetherapy.com. Three is spelled out, THREE. And my main book is 3 Minute Therapy. I also have another book called Rational Drinking, How to Live Happily with or Without Alcohol, which is also on addictions, and all addictions have the same structure, but the content is somewhat different. Okay, well, thank you again for watching and tune in next week for our next episode.